But what I'm reaching for, what I'm dying to get you to say is that you feel bad for them.
I hesitate to say it because it handicaps the army. All this emphasis on the poor Palestinians makes every soldier in Israel feel guilty. You can't fight a war like that.
You can't have empathy for humanity and fight a war. All right, Rabbi Manis Friedman. He did his last name too. Rabbi Manis Friedman, we are recording. Thank you so much for joining me on my podcast today.
Thank you for inviting me.
So Rabbi Manis Friedman, for those who don't know, is the most popular rabbi on YouTube with nearly 500,000 followers. So I'd love to ask you first about the war that Israel is in and what your thoughts are, what Netanyahu should do, what Israel should do. So let's start there. What's going on in your perspective?
Okay, the first thing is Netanyahu doesn't ask me what he should do. I don't think I can tell him what to do. But if you want my reaction to what's going on, I think we need to clarify the words that are bandied around. What is the definition of a civilian? What is the definition of proportionate reaction? And what is the definition of genocide? Because we get very confused, and many Jews are feeling guilty. There's no reason to feel guilty.
So what's
Civilians are not to be killed. But how do you know who's a civilian unless the civilian identifies himself? So just to say you're killing civilians, first of all, who is a civilian? The guy who makes bullets in a factory, is he a civilian? The guy who makes boots for the soldiers, is he a civilian? Civilian is a very broad word, and you've got to give it some definition.
I know that women and children are probably civilians. Like if there's a kid who's 10 years old or a woman who's unarmed. And how are they supposed to identify themselves as civilians
I
before
don't
they
know.
get bombed?
I don't
Yeah.
know. I don't know. But how is the soldier who's being shot at supposed to identify the civilian? I don't know.
But isn't the onus of responsibility on the one doing the shooting? So if
Not
the
if
U.S.
his life is in danger. No.
But the Israeli soldier who went into Gaza, his life is in danger because he went into Gaza.
Well, that's
So
called war. So
right.
either call off war, but don't say you can have a war without killing civilians.
Yeah.
You can say no more war.
Well, I guess, look, I agree. In war, civilians die. It is inevitable. It's an inevitable tragedy. But I would hope that we would agree that in war, civilians die, and it's an inevitable tragedy. But the word tragedy is the piece I'm sticking on to here. Like that, I feel like that's important for Judaism, for us to not want to kill civilians and to do so extremely reluctantly.
Yeah, but let's not be inconsistent.
Yeah.
If I'm talking about tragedy, the death of a soldier is also a tragedy. Why are soldiers disposable? They're not.
Well, the soldiers who are dying, the Israeli soldiers who are dying are the ones going into Gaza. I'm just saying that why is there this callousness? That's what I don't get. Like if a woman in Afghanistan or Ukraine or America or Gaza or Israel dies, we should say, wow, that's so terrible that that woman or that child died. And yes, war is a terrible thing, but do we no longer have empathy for women and children who are dying in warfare?
And why don't we have empathy for the soldiers who are dying?
Because should we have the same level of empathy for women and children dying as we should for soldiers dying?
Yeah, life is life, death is death.
Yeah. But if you're like a woman and you're not holding a gun and you're just trying to make dinner and then you get bombed and now you're dead, isn't
Yeah.
that different from a soldier marching into Gaza and then getting shot by someone in Hamas?
You can make the argument the other way too. The soldier is trying to protect his country, and he's risking his life. And if he dies, it's a terrible tragedy. We shouldn't make that distinction so clearly because it makes it sound like soldiers are meant to die. This- that is not that is not sympathetic.
Well, they're not meant to die, but should we have any, I mean, as should the Israeli army take any responsibility to avoid? I think they do, by the way, but
Yeah, they
should they take
do.
responsibility to avoid killing civilians? I
They
mean,
do.
yeah. So, but I guess your stance is that if a soldier dies, it's the same as if a woman dies or a man or
Yeah. So
it's
what is
there's
the
no.
conclusion? The
Sorry?
the conclusion of it is we have to have peace.
Hmm.
Soldiers
Yeah.
shouldn't die. And buildings shouldn't be destroyed. It's all tragic. So
The
how do you get to peace? That's the question.
yeah. How do you get to peace?
Well, so first of all, the definition of peace, according to the Torah, is your enemy will not attack you again for at least 40 years. That's
Okay.
called peace. But if they're going to attack you again in 10 years, as has been the case in Israel, you've never had peace. You've had a ceasefire. Why is there no peace in the Middle East? After all the wars, there's still no peace. None of the wars were decisive enough to bring 40 years of peace, which means we never had peace.
If
Yeah.
Israel had been more aggressive and killed more people, then there'd be peace, is what you're saying.
Well, if Israel's policy was a
Yeah.
little more firm, like, for example, if you start a war with us, we're not going to accept a ceasefire until we've destroyed you.
Yeah.
Just relying on a ceasefire encourages war.
Do we think that is Jewish life more important than non-Jewish life? Like Jewish people more important than non-Jewish people?
Well, considering the fact that we are a light to the nations,
Hmm.
who is more important, the teacher or the student?
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know.
I
So
know.
what do you think?
You pay the teacher to teach the student.
Yeah.
Obviously, the students are more important.
So in that case, you would say that
The world is more important, and we are a messenger to the world.
yeah. But should we value whether we're talking about the Israel-Gaza war, should we believe that Jewish civilian lives matter more than non-Jewish civilian lives? I'm
Only in the
wondering.
sense that you care more about your own family than somebody else's
Yeah.
family. But in terms of life, no,
Oh,
no.
okay. Well, because I had to ask you because look, I'd have to imagine that if 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 and when people get civilians get killed, you wouldn't say, well, they didn't know it was a civilian. It's up to the civilian to decide, right? You'd say, I mean, the kids in Golan Heights who were just killed. I know you wouldn't say, oh, well, it's the kids' fault because they didn't tell them that they were not militants, right? You wouldn't say that. So my question to you is, why is it the responsibility of like Palestinian civilians to prove their civilianhood or innocence
Because they're
when you
shooting
would?
at us.
Well, the civilians aren't shooting at us, right?
There's the question. Somebody is shooting at us.
So there's 2 million people, and some of them are shooting. So
Yeah,
fuck it, let's just kill all
we,
of them.
we
Is that
got
what
a
you're?
problem.
Yeah.
But those teenagers, the Druze teenagers, were not shooting at anybody, and the Druze were not shooting at anybody, certainly not at Hezbollah.
Hmm. There's been a blockade against Gazans to prevent Hamas. The stated intention is to prevent Hamas from getting weapons. But of course, the way a blockade works is it's going to slow the influx of other stuff like food and building supplies. And so the result is that Gaza's economy has been something like cut in half for the last many years, and that is part of the reason why there's such a high poverty rate. Obviously, there's other reasons too, like Hamas is an evil group, but one of the reasons is the blockade has caused suffering. Do you buy that, or do you think that's baloney? Do you
It's
think
not
it's baloney?
it's not true at all. There isn't a
Yeah.
lot of poverty in Gaza, or there
Oh,
wasn't.
oh, there wasn't poverty in Gaza. Oh,
If there was, it's because of Hamas, because they take
okay.
everything away from it, their citizens, just
Could it
like every other corrupt government.
could it also? Do you think that when Israel blocks food from getting in, do you think that matters, or does that
They're
not
not.
affect?
They're not. Hundreds and hundreds of trucks with
Yeah.
food
No,
go
no.
into
I'm
Gaza.
talking about the blockades in 2006. Like, so Israel has the blockade, which is the air, sea, and land blockade, which is prevent goods from getting into Gaza.
When?
Um, the last 30 years. So,
There's no such thing.
oh,
Such
okay,
thing.
yeah.
Gaza was doing very well.
I thought maybe I'm reading the wrong sources. I thought it was a desolate place where people are struggling because of, yeah. Well, where are you seeing that? Because I'm looking at pretty much every source that says that Gazans have been suffered as a result of the blockade and haven't. But maybe they're all these sources are nonsense, right?
They're nonsense because
Yeah,
if you
yeah.
see pictures of the cities in Gaza, they're very sophisticated, they're
Mhm.
very modern, they're doing very well.
The
You think it's
employment
like
rate, I think, was like
you
40
think it's like a
unemployment
bunch
rate.
of you think it's like a bunch of tents with no
I mean, you
land?
wouldn't want to pick up your family and move to Gaza 10 years ago, right? You know it's not a nice place to live,
It was a
right?
nice place until Hamas took over.
Oh,
And Israel gave away a big portion of it, and they
yeah.
destroyed that too. So
So
that's
there's
not
no
true.
it's has Israel's security not hurt Gazans in any way? Like the blockade hasn't hurt them?
Which blockade?
The air, sea, and land blockade that Israel's had since 2006. So they sift the ships. So there's a fishing. Palestinians can't fish beyond a certain point. I found this because there's a couple dozen citations of human rights violations cited by the UN and other,
The
but I guess they're
UN?
all anti-Semitic, right?
Don't even quote the UN.
Okay, so UN's anti-Semitic. Is the ICJ anti-Semitic?
Yes.
Okay, so ICJ is anti-Semitic. Is the EU anti-Semitic?
No.
Okay, so who can we trust then to make a besides Israel
Yeah, you can
if it
trust you can trust the tourist advertisements
yeah,
inviting people to come to Gaza.
yeah, okay.
It was a
I,
beautiful.
I thought it was I thought it was a rough place to live. No.
Oh, no, no.
Oh.
It could have been, what do they call it? It could have been the Singapore of the Middle East.
Yeah. Well, there were a lot of factors like Hamas and Israel's blockade, which
There was no
sources have said
blockade. There was
there's
no
no.
blockade.
Okay. Hmm. For me to believe there's no blockade, I have to believe that like almost every single media outlet is lying. Like
Oh,
almost every
no.
single one.
Welcome to the real world.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So it's all the fault of Hamas. And then what do you think about the West Bank? Is it okay that these Israelis are taking more and more land? That what if there's a Palestinian, what if there's a person in the West Bank living there in a house and their grandparent lived there, and then the IDF or an Israeli person kicks them out? What are the rights of the Palestinian? What are the rights of the Israeli in that situation?
It's a mess.
It's a mess. Yeah.
It's a bloody mess. A state within a state. It's so it's impossible.
Hmm.
It's impossible.
Do the Israelis or the Jews have the right to take over the West Bank?
Yes.
Perhaps. Oh, they do.
Yeah.
Oh, what gives them that right?
It's the land of Israel.
Okay. But if someone's living there, what I don't understand. Like if did
They're living in
because
Israel.
right. So but the Bible gives the Jews the right to kick out people in the West Bank.
Not only the Bible, the country.
The
If you're a
country. Well,
brother,
no, why but Israel doesn't own the West Bank. Not the under what law why do you think that Israel owns the West Bank? Like why do you think that's
for the
part of it?
very simple fact that we won it in the 67 war.
But the West Bank is not considered Israel territory. It's the West Bank.
It was captured by Israel, so it's Israel's.
Do you think that Israel has done enough to protect civilian life in Gaza? I know they tried to create an exit to Egypt, but we know that Egypt blocked it. So, I mean, what would you think if you knew someone who was born in Gaza and is now stuck there and might get hit by a missile tomorrow? Would you feel bad for them or
It's an impossible situation.
yeah. No, I know, but what I'm reaching for, what I'm dying to get you to say is that you feel bad for them.
I hesitate to say it because it handicaps the army. All this emphasis on the poor Palestinians makes every soldier in Israel feel guilty. You can't fight a war like that.
You can't have empathy for humanity and fight a war. I mean,
You
you
can,
listen,
but it's way out of proportion.
but when with the war in Vietnam was a bloody war, and I'm sure that the U.S. military, looking back or the time, was like, "Wow, God damn it, I wish we didn't have to." Sorry for swearing. They probably said, "I wish we didn't have to kill so many civilians." Like nobody wants to kill civilians, right?
You know, the
Nobody.
problem with Vietnam was not civilians.
Yeah,
Problem with Vietnam was whether it was a legitimate war, whether it was necessary, whether it accomplished anything.
yeah. But if the U.S. has a war with Russia and there's civilians that die, should the U.S. feel bad that civilians die? I mean,
They should feel
if
bad that there was a war and
yeah,
people died on both sides.
yeah, the civilians though, like that's what I thought
Civilians
Judaism
on
was all
both sides.
about.
Why
I
is the
thought,
emphasis one-sided?
well, I care about Israel. I think Israeli civilian life is essential, but what I'm saying is that if an is if an Israeli civilian were to die, you would feel bad. And if a Palestinian civilian were to die, I think you would say that's the result of war, right? And that there's no room for empathy.
You can't compare family to strangers. You're asking me
Mhm.
to care about strangers as much as I care about my own family?
No, I'm asking you to say that it would be a shame if a civilian died. That's what I'm asking.
It's a shame that a soldier dies.
Yeah,
It's a shame that there's a war.
it is a shame there's a war.
So the press, the media, the world is trying to make us feel guilty, not
Yeah.
empathetic.
Hmm. Well, I don't want you to feel guilty, but I am wondering, like, if let's say a 5-year-old in Gaza dies today, should we feel bad for that child and his family that died, or should we say it is what it is, war, terrible things happen?
In which context? If
Let's
you're
say
saying, if you're
today,
saying, no, if you're saying Israel is doing something wrong
mhm,
because a civilian died, I don't accept that.
okay.
Is it a tragedy that someone died? Obviously.
Oh, oh, so you are saying okay, so it's a tragedy when people die, when civilians die.
Of course, it's a tragedy.
Oh,
But
okay, that's what.
that. Don't
Oh,
use that to make
oh.
the Israeli soldier feel guilty.
No, no, I was having a heart attack because I'm talking to a rabbi and I'm begging him to say that when civilians die, uh, it's a tragedy. That's all I'm. And if
Why
you, I don't,
why does that need to be said?
because I feel that if it's not said, it sounds like you're being apathetic, I think, towards civilian death, maybe. I don't know.
I think that there is this attitude in the press
Yeah.
that there's something wrong with Israel because it's killing civilians.
Hmm.
Not buying that.
But don't you think people like empathy is good, right? If we want the world to look at Jews and appreciate Jews, they should think of us as empathetic people that care about when civilians die.
And they know that we care more than any other country,
Mm-hmm.
right? Is that true or not?
I don't know because I that's what I'm asking you. I'm trying to understand is
It is true. We go
okay.
way, way beyond the call of duty.